Hi, and welcome back to a general overview of curriculum development. This is video part 5. We're going to begin with objectives, resume with objectives 17 through 24. Objective 17 is to identify aspects of pinpointing in a multi-stage cycle of curriculum development and evaluation. Number 18 is for you to identify the definition of an ecological assessment. 19 is to organize the steps of conducting an ecological assessment. 20 is to discriminate environments from sub-environments, activities, and skills. 21 is to identify the defining features of one way to conceptualize social validity. 22 is to discriminate between long-term, short-term, and intermediate goals. 23. Identify when teachers should begin working on a new goal after a current goal is met. And then 24 is to identify elements of an ITP required at age 16. So the first one we'll cover is pinpoint. Pinpoint is to develop an inventory using an ecological assessment and assess the student's mastered skills, otherwise referred to as assessing their current levels, then assess social validity, and prioritize what to teach. So there are four essential aspects of pinpointing. Develop the inventory, which is just a list. Assess the mastered skills. Assess social validity, and prioritize what to teach. So you decide what to teach by creating an inventory of what you need to teach for the student to meet their goals. You can select a published, commercially available evidence-based curriculum, or you can develop new curricula. Now, states develop readily available curricula, or you can obtain curricula through the school district you're working for, or from commercial publishers. In most cases, if you're working outside of the school setting, you would obtain curricula from commercial publishers, or you would develop your own curricula. Curricula may be focused on pre-academic skills, academic skills, functional life skills, or a combination of these. And there are many curricula to choose from. So what we're going to do in the next couple slides, I'm just going to share a few with you that are popular or well-known. So here are a few common assessments. The first is the VB-MAP, also known as Verbal Behavior Milestones Assessment and Placement Program. And so it's primarily assessment, but there are some guidelines for curriculum as well in the VB-MAP. Now, the VB-MAP is very popular in both schools and outside of schools for assessing verbal and social skills and barriers to learning in young children with autism spectrum disorders, other developmental disorders, and also intellectual disability. Yeah, so the VB-MAP is very common. That's a good one to have, probably. Now, there's also the Brugance. The Brugance is also a very common assessment. It's well known. And this particular version here, the Brugance, that came out recently, meets IDA requirements and addresses student needs from birth through high school. Okay, so the VB-MAP really is only applicable to kids up to, let's say, about 5 or 6 years old, although the VB-MAP is also useful, is still useful for assessing verbal skills and social skills at older ages when individuals demonstrate severe delays. Now, Essential for Living is a relatively new assessment. It was developed by Patrick McGreevy, and Patrick McGreevy is a pioneer and a leader in the field of applied behavior analysis and an authority on teaching verbal behavior and adaptive behavior in individuals with severe disabilities. Now, Essentials for living is essentially both an assessment and curriculum, but its focus is on teaching assessing and teaching functional life skills. So these are skills that individuals would need to be taught, otherwise someone will need to perform these skills for them. And Essentials for Living, one of the great features about it is it identifies for practitioners 8 essential skills that must be taught to every learner. Essentials for Living is very systematic in its organization, and so that's also a curriculum that you may lean more heavily towards, or you may utilize more when a student's trajectory is not primarily academic. So if they're primarily on a functional life skills or vocational trajectory, Essentials for Living could be particularly useful and relevant. The Early Start Denver model, or ESDM, has a curriculum checklist, and this is an assessment that's mostly appropriate or useful for assessing very young children. So let's say 1 to 2 to 3 years old. And this is just an example of what the curriculum checklist looks like. It's organized by different levels and domains. So here, level 1, receptive communication is really where you would start out in this assessment. And it asks, and some common features of these assessments are that you can either collect the data on the student's skills by making direct observations yourself or interviewing others. For example, in this curriculum checklist from the ESDM, you can observe the child and then collect the data, or someone can report it to you. So, for example, this one prompts you to look for skills that would fall under the umbrella of receptive communication. So 1 is localizes the sounds by turning the head towards source. 2 looks to playful vocal sounds. Number 5 follows a proximal point to place objects in containers, puzzle pieces. Number 7 looks to partner when name is called, and so forth. I use all 3 of these in my practice. I recently went to the Association for Behavior Analysis International in 2018, and they had a ton of new books, a lot of which I haven't seen before, and I was surprised by how many different types of assessments and curricula there are available that are grounded in applied behavior analysis. And so I took pictures of some of them because I knew that I'd be designing this lecture for you. And so here are some more examples. Like I said before, there are tons of assessments and curricula out there. This one here by David Tess is Evidence-Based Instructional Strategies for Transition specifically. This one here is for autism spectrum disorder and the transition to secondary school. This one is related to inclusive programming for middle school students with autism. This is more broadly educational interventions for students with autism. This is evidence-based treatment for children with autism, specifically the CARD model. Center for Autism and Related Disorders is one of the largest ABA providers in the world. They're national. In fact, they might be international at this point. But as you can see, there are assessments that are either broad in scope in that they cover a wide range of functional areas, or some assessments focus on certain stages of life, such as early childhood or transition. Right? Some are going to be more academically focused, and so forth. Here's another one. This is Independent Living Skills Assessment Protocol by Partington and Mueller. I've never used this before, but it looks like it could be pretty good. So I just took a picture of the table of contents so you can see some of the aspects of independent living that can be assessed with this instrument here. So they provide guidance on assessing self-care, or community travel, money management, safety, living with others, interpersonal relationships, food and meal planning, interesting stuff, right? So that could be a probably really useful tool for assessing and independent living skills and developing curriculum. Here's some more examples. Skill streaming. Simple Steps here by Karen Miller, and then Young Learners with Autism Spectrum Disorder. This is for children ages 3 to 10 by Lindsay Hilson. Alright, ASR 24, which is an aspect of pinpointing? Is it A, develop an inventory using an ecological assessment? B, assess the student's mastered skills and assess current levels? C, assess social validity? Or D, all of the above? Give a few more seconds. Try to close the poll, and the answer here is D. All of the above are aspects of pinpointing. ASR 25, prioritize what to teach, is another aspect of pinpointing. Is that true? A, or false? B. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is A, true. ASR 26, in pinpointing, use curricula to compile a list of skills that will need to be taught. Is that A, true, or B, false? A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is A, true. Okay, let's look at conducting an ecological assessment. You conduct an ecological assessment using an ecological inventory. Well, what's an ecological assessment? It's the process of systematic identification of all of the functions critical for success in the collection of settings that one individual currently encounters and can expect to encounter in the future. The ecological assessment identifies tasks, activities, and skills that, if performed correctly, will result in reinforcement. So that's critical. We're talking about tasks, activities, and skills that specifically result in reinforcement. What does that mean? That means that tasks and activities and skills will continue to maintain over time after instruction or intervention has occurred. Alright, so let's look at the steps of an ecological assessment. The first is to list all current, future, and sub-environments. Next is to list sub-environment activities. Let me revise number one. Number one should say list all current and future sub-environments. Okay? Really what you do before these steps of an ecological assessment is to determine which environment you're going to conduct that ecological assessment on. And then from there you list all current and future sub-environments. But we're just going to go with these 4 steps. Okay, so list all current and future sub-environments. 2 is to list sub-environment activities. In other words, for one of those sub-environments, list all of the activities that the learner would have to do, or might have to do, or might have to be involved in, or participate or complete. And then number 3 is to list skills needed to function independently in each sub-environment activity. Right? So you can imagine that this process involves a funneling down. You're starting with the environment, and then you go select a sub-environment, and you identify the activities within that sub-environment. Each of those activities would branch off into different skills required to participate in that activity independently and successfully. Step 4 is to organize the skills and activities by domain. Okay, those are our 4 steps of an ecological assessment. List all current and future sub-environments, then list sub-environment activities, then list skills needed to function independently in each sub-environment activity, and then organize the skills and activities by domain. So I'm going to give you an example of what that might look like. So first we're going to look at a domain of vocational skills. Okay, and the environment is going to be a family restaurant. So let's say long term, it looks like this student will likely work in their family's restaurant. And there's multiple sub-environments of the restaurant we could have chose. In this case, we're focusing on the pantry, and the activity is updating the inventory in the pantry. And a particular skill we're going to focus on is locate new delivery. Okay, let's see how this looks visually. So environments. This student in the long term and currently will spend time in school, home, the family restaurant, church, and a community pool, let's say. These probably aren't all the environments, but that's what we can put on the slide here, right? Okay, now let's look at sub-environments, because each one of these environments is comprised of some environments. Another way you can think about that is context. So if you've taken another class, if you've taken 3303 with me in the module on behavior and environment, I talk about dividing the environment into context and the context into stimuli. Okay, so this is a similar concept that we're talking about here. So we're focused on the family restaurant as the environment, and there are sub-environments in the restaurant. We have the pantry, the kitchen, the restrooms, the parking lot, the lobby. These are all parts of the restaurant where workers are going to work and do activities, right? So let's focus on the pantry here. In the pantry, there are multiple activities that occur. There's monitoring the temperature, there's assessing expiration dates on foods, and updating the inventory. Now, some skills that would be required specifically to update the inventory, one of those activities, may include locating new deliveries, getting scissors or a razor, using the scissors or razor to open boxes, taking contents out and placing packaging in recycling, then labeling the contents and making a record on the inventory sheet. If they do all that, they've updated the inventory. Right? Okay, so that's a quick example there. And let's do some ASR. So ASR 27, which is a definition of an ecological assessment? A results-oriented approach leading to improved academic and functional achievement for the purpose of facilitating a student's movement to post-school activities. B, a thorough assessment of the individual student's needs, current levels, and short-term, long-term, and intermediate goals. Or C, the process of systematic identification of all of the functions critical for success in the collection of settings that one individual currently encounters and can expect to encounter in the future. A couple more seconds. Okay, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is C. Now, A is a definition of transition planning. And B just describes the IEP process broadly. C is the definition of ecological assessment. ASR 28. Which step of an ecological assessment comes first? Is it A, list sub-environment activities, B, list all current and future sub-environments, C, organize the skills and activities by domain, or D, list skills needed to function independently in each sub-environment activity? Give you a couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. The answer is B. List all current, future, list all current and future sub-environments. Which step of an ecological assessment comes second? A. List sub-environment activities. B. List all current, future sub-environments. C. Organize the skills and activities by domain. Or D. List skills needed to function independently in each sub-environment activity. Give you a couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is A, list sub-environment activities. So the first step is to list all current and future sub-environments. And then you list sub-environment activities. Which step of an ecological assessment comes third? A. List sub-environment activities. B. List all current and future sub-environments. C. Organize the skills and activities by domain. Or D. List skills needed to function independently in each sub-environment activity. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is D. And that makes C, organize the skills and activities by domain, last. Alright. At this point, it's clear that obviously the ASR numbers are missing or out of sequence. So I'm not going to have time to re-record this video in this semester. So please bear with me and just record your ASR answers in the order that I'm presenting them to you. All right. ASR 29, at a food court, we'll say the food court is the environment, and then working at a hot dog stand is the sub-environment. Okay, or if we want to be really precise, we can just say the hot dog stand is the sub-environment. Okay. What is the activity? Is it A, ask the customer if they want ketchup or mustard, or B, make the hot dog how the customer wants it? A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll go ahead and close the poll, and the answer here is make the hot dog how the customer wants it. Alright, so that's the activity here. So again, at a food court is the environment. The sub-environment is the hot dog stand, and the student is going to be working at the hot dog stand. And one of the activities in that sub-environment would be make the hot dog how the customer wants it. So which skill is required to complete an activity successfully in this sub-environment? Is it A, ask the customer if they want ketchup or mustard, B, make the hot dog how the customer wants it, or C, the Cinnabon shop next door? Give you a few more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is A, ask the customer if they want ketchup or mustard. So that'd be a verbal skill that would be required for them to successfully complete the activity of making the hot dog how the customer wants it. Alright, next is assess mastered skills. So also known as the student's mastered skills are also known as the student's current levels of function. If you use the commercially available curriculum to assess, it would be referred to as a curriculum-based assessment, or CBA. CBAs are directly related to instructional objectives and materials within the curriculum. Essential features of CBA include the following. A, ongoing assessment to determine progress in the curriculum. Use of valid assessment instruments or strategies. Use of quantitative and qualitative data. Those are essential features of a curriculum-based assessment. An example of a CBA is the Brigance SIBS 2. Rather than go through that in detail, what I suggest is at some point pause this video, type that into Google. It'll take you right to the website, and you can check out what the Brigance SIBS 2 looks like. Social validity. Now, social validity includes cultural relevance, and that's the extent to which relevant stakeholders being the student, parents, teachers, involved community members, want the behavior to change, consider the procedures acceptable, and report satisfaction with the results. And that's based on a seminal article by Wolf in 1978. And let's look at an ASR. So in the ASR, what you're going to have to do is, as I read a scenario to you, you're going to have to determine whether in that scenario the stakeholders wanted the behavior to change, considered the procedures acceptable, and reported satisfaction with the results. The paraprofessionals determined that 3 of the students' challenging behaviors must be addressed ASAP. So one of those three, one was prioritized, so they targeted that one first. And the behavior reduced by 90% for 2 weeks. Everyone agreed that the new low levels of the behavior were good enough to start addressing the other challenging behaviors. Everyone agreed that the intervention was easy to implement with high fidelity and had no problems with it. Which critical criterion of social validity was not met? A. Stakeholders want the behavior to change. B. Stakeholders consider the procedures acceptable. C. Stakeholders report satisfaction with the results. Or D. None. All of these criteria were met. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is D. None. All of these criteria were met. Next is prioritize activities and skills. So regardless of whether the focus is on academic skills, functional life skills, or both, teachers need to teach first things first, meaning it makes no sense to teach students skills for which they're missing prerequisites. Alright, so for example, I recently worked with a client who was unable to dress himself, and his mother dressed him 100%. Right, so he would lay down. She would take his, and he also wasn't toilet trained, so she would take it. And he's 5 or 6 years old, and his mother would take his diaper off, take his clothes on, put on a new diaper, put on new clothes, send him on his way. Okay, and obviously the family wanted to work on this skill of teaching him to be independent, or at least at the very least cooperate in putting his assisting putting his clothes on. But unfortunately there were some prerequisites missing. Okay, because this would be the skill of getting dressed would be a behavior chain, right? And so the client or the learner would need to be able to acquire a multi-step sequence of responses that could all be linked with SDs, which are also conditioned reinforcers, and then have all that maintained by a terminal reinforcer. What I'm doing is describing the critical features of a behavior chain. And so, unfortunately, had demonstrated no other behavior chains. So there were no other behavior chains in his repertoire, so it suggested there were some prerequisite skills missing in general for being able to acquire behavior chains. And some of the things I noticed in an initial assessment were that he was unable to identify types of clothing. In other words, if you said get your underwear, get the diaper, get your socks, get your shirt, he couldn't distinguish between the items when he heard those words by selecting the correct one. He also has some some severe fine motor skills. For example, he couldn't turn doorknobs and couldn't button or unbutton shirts or use zippers. And actually there's quite a bit of fine motor skills involved in, like, putting one's undergarments on and putting one's pants on a shirt. For example, for a shirt you have to be able to kind of crumple up the sides of the shirt and kind of have them in your hand like this, so that the hole in the shirt where your head goes is clear and accessible, so you can put the shirt over your head. And then you need a fine motor skill of kind of pulling the shirt to the side so you can kind of get your arm in there, right, and through the sleeve, I mean. And so anyways, there are all these skills, and then so it wouldn't make any sense for us to teach him to it wouldn't make any sense for us to try to teach them to acquire that behavior chain of addressing self without addressing those prerequisite skills first. Okay, so nevertheless, there's a distinction between curricula focused on academic skills and those focused on functional life skills. Now, if academic skills are the focus, the sequence of skills taught is generally predetermined by the standard curriculum, grade, and age. And teachers may monitor progress differently and use different teaching strategies for children with developmental disabilities or intellectual disability. Now, we can contrast that with functional life skills, like the one I just described to you. If functional life skills are the focus, the sequence of skills taught are determined by teachers and parents based on typical developmental sequences in relevant contexts, with a focus on skills needed for independence and a high quality of life. Examples of functional life skills assessments for curriculum development are the Vineland, the most current version as of August 2018 is the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scales 3. There's the ABAS, the ELAP, Brigance, BCP, and the ABS RS. So I'm not going to go into details on those or describe those to you, because you can simply Google them, and their descriptions and the companies that sell those instruments, you can readily identify those and review those on your own. At some point in this course, we'll go into detail on the Vineland. So, and I should also say that the Vineland is very, very popular. Almost everyone uses the Vineland. Okay, so let's also talk about now delineating long-term, short-term, and intermediate goals. So you would delineate these different types of goals in that order. You'd start with long-term, and then back up and write short-term goals, and then back up and write intermediate goals. Now, long-term goals pertain to post-school transition and beyond, also known as the criterion of ultimate functioning. Now, some benefits of long-term goal setting include A, that IEPs are continuous rather than focus only on the here and now. That is, IEPs are continuous rather than focus only on the here and now when you write long-term goals pertaining to post-school transition and beyond. B, materials related to future relevant environments over contrived materials are selected. C, education in an integrated setting is emphasized. And D, age-appropriate and culturally appropriate skills are the focus. So an example of a long-term goal is that Mark will live at home while attending community college. That's an example. Intermediate goals pertain to the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, and they're also known as the criterion of the next environment. All right. So Mark will, an example here of an intermediate goal is that Mark will use a cell phone to call friends or family or to make arrangements with community services, such as a college administration office or community center. And then short-term goals pertain to the current year. All right, so they're also known as the criterion of the immediate environment. And for example, Mark will save a new number in his cell phone independently. All right, so for example, if the long-term goal here is Mark will live at home while attending community college, an intermediate goal can be that Mark will use a cell phone to call friends or family, to make arrangements with community services such as a college administration office or community center. Then you have the short-term goal that pertains to the current year, that Mark will save a new number in his cell phone independently. So that's something that he can do sooner. So the way to think about this is when you're delineating between these different goals, think post-school, 3 to 5 years away, current year. Okay, so it's now Goals are a necessary component of a student's individualized education plan, and a goal can be defined generally as a broad statement about outcomes that teachers expect to occur within a specified time. The role of goals in the IEP is A, to enable the student to be involved in and make progress in the general curriculum and meet other needs too. That's from Bill Heward in 2009, page 68. But also to guide the development of behaviorally stated objectives. Okay, so goals are necessary in the IEP. They're just broad statements of outcomes that are going to occur in a certain amount of time. And the goals not only involve the student to be involved in general curriculum and meet other needs, but they guide the development of behaviorally stated objectives. That's because behaviorally stated objectives guide the IEP team to teach the skills and the behaviors that the student needs to meet their goals. Okay. Now, I also want to emphasize that educators should not aim for the annual review. Rather, they should teach the goal as fast as possible. This is something that I've seen quite often in special education classrooms over the years as I consulted, is that for some reason teachers and other members of the IEP team seem to be really just focused, let's say like the intensity of their intervention or the intensity of their instruction, the frequency that they revise and evaluate their teaching practices seems to be focused on a trajectory where it's expected the student will meet their goal like at the end of the year, you know, at their next annual review. But that is not the way to go. The focus should always, for individuals with autism, intellectual disability, other developmental disabilities, is to teach the goal, help them meet their goals as fast as possible, because they're already so far behind. And like we talked before, most of these students have many more things that need to be directly taught that you have time or resources for. There's not a moment to waste. You have to work as hard and fast as you can to help them meet their goals quickly. So in other words, you don't want to wait for the next IEP meeting to start working on the next goal when a given annual goal is met. You just start working on that next goal immediately. All right. Critical features of goals. Okay, goals always are annual. They include an observable, measurable description of the target behavior. They include the relevant context, mastery or fluency criteria. They specify independent performance, and they're achieved through mastery of behaviorally stated objectives. Variable features of goals is that they may target academic or non-academic behavior, and the goal may or may not be generalization. Behaviorally stated objectives specify actions the learner should be able to perform after completing one or more instructional components. All right? And they have the same critical and variable features as goals. All right, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a break here and end this video part, and I'll see you in the next video part.